Happy Tuesday, Kings and Queens. Welcome to week 2 for your Math 7 course. This is Mr. Walker back again with you with another video. I'm expecting that your cameras are on, your mics are muted, and that you guys are ready to learn. Of course, Mr. Spencer is facilitating your lesson today. There will be moments where we need to interact and collaborate, and he will pause the video accordingly while we go through our lesson. So here is today's agenda for Tuesday, September 8th. Our objective is students will be able to engage in the 3-read protocol and also, again, become familiar with class expectations. Our agenda is as follows. We will have a welcome and a review of the agenda, which we're doing now. We'll do a community check-in, and our focus is going to be on submitting assignments, student supplies, and a short literacy activity. We're going to engage in the 3-read protocol, and then we're going to have our closure explaining Tuesday's independent assignment, Wednesday's independent assignment, and then there'll be some time at the end for any questions that you all may have. It's going to be an amazing week. So for the first part of our community check-in, moving forward, you will lose points if your assignments are late. As long as you turned in all of your assignments for last week at this point, you will be good. There will be no deductions. However, moving forward, we have to make sure that our assignments get turned in on time. So please be sure to pay attention to the due dates in Google Classroom. Remember, all of your assignments go to your Google Calendar, and they also are posted on Google Classroom. Next, I want to just remind us of the supplies that are needed for this class. Remember, we asked you last week to make sure that you have a 3 or a 5 subject spiral notebook. You can even have a 1 subject spiral notebook, but we want to make sure that you don't have to go out and buy more than one throughout the school year. So we want to make sure that you have at least a 3 subject or a 5 subject for math specifically. That way you can keep all of your notes and activities in one place. We also want to make sure that you have a pencil and a highlighter. All of these supplies will be needed by Monday, September 14th. It's extremely important that you have them by Monday so that when we get into heavy content that you are prepared with all the things that you need. We will continue to remind you of the supplies needed throughout the week just so that you don't forget, because again, you only have this week to get all 3 necessary supplies. All right, let's move on to our student discourse moves. Last week, we talked about the standards for mathematical practices, and one of them was specifically MP3, and it talks about student discourse. So we want to take some time to tell and explain. So whenever we're having conversations in class, we want to be able to use some of the following sentence stems. I think, I know it will work because, or the best strategy will be. We're going to have some time to practice these today in class. So now we're going to have a chance to talk about it. We want to make sure that we have a rich classroom discussion. Normally, we would do this in Pear Deck, which is similar to Nearpod or a way to interact. But I know that some of us have been having issues with our devices, or we can't necessarily use other applications while we're on the live Zoom. So for now, we're just going to kind of do something a little bit different. So let's actually talk about it. So I want us to take a second after I read the following questions to have a discussion or use your chat feature to answer the following questions. The first question says, identify the type of data visual. So we're talking about this visual that's on the right-hand side. We also want to determine the topic of the data visual. So what's the topic of all of this? Examine the given information from the data visual, including all introductory text. And then also develop predictions, maybe some deductions, inferences, or conclusions. And I'll even add questions about the data visual. So what are some possible questions you could ask regarding the visual that's presented here? So again, there are 4 questions. Let's pause the video at this time and unmute your mics and share out. or you can share your ideas in the chat. So let's take about 2 minutes to discuss amongst our classmates sharing out. So now that we had some time to share out with your classmates, let's just make sure that we're all on the same page. The first question asked us to identify the type of data visual. Hopefully, amongst your conversations with your classmates, you noticed that this was just a table. That's the type of visual that we see here. The second question says, determine the topic of the visual. So again, we said the visual is a table, and obviously from reading the title and the information that's given here, we should notice that it's a recipe of some sort. We don't know what we're making, but we do know that it's probably some type of recipe. The third question says to examine the given information from the data visual, including all introductory text. So if I look at the titles of my table, we have the number of dozens, cups of brown sugar, and also cups of white sugar, and then it gives us values for each one of those portions. The fourth question says develop predictions, deductions, inferences, or conclusions about the data visual, and also what is a possible question you could ask regarding it. So, if I were to just make a prediction, let's say if I wanted to make 6 dozens of whatever this recipe is for, I would probably say that we're going to use 64 cups of brown sugar and maybe 62 cups of white sugar. One question that I had that you probably also would have is if I look at the recipe for 2 dozen, the cups of brown sugar goes down to 12, while the rest of these are all increasing. It goes from 14 to 12, but then it jumps to 34, 44, and 54. It makes me wonder, should the number for 2 dozens really be 24 since each one of these were increasing by 4? Increasing by tens, just like the cups of white sugar were also increasing by tens. And as you can now see, this recipe was for a plate of cookies. Now let's take some time to dive into the main portion of the lesson for today. We're going to engage in the 3-read protocol featuring the horse trailer. Now, our 3-read protocol is going to be used whenever we're solving problems that might involve words or a task. So for the 3-read protocol, there's the role of the teacher and also the role of the student. So today we are going to work together on making sense of a mathematical word problem. Sometimes these are called word or story problems. Just like when we read stories in books, we have to comprehend what the story is actually about. We will read it 3 times because good readers reread stories to make sense of them. Each time I'm going to ask you to discuss and respond to a specific question. The first time you will have to listen very carefully because I'm going to read it out loud to you. You will not have it in front of you. So after each read, like I just said, I'm going to ask you guys a question. So we'll pause the video and have a chance for you guys to discuss amongst your classmates. So for the teacher role, I'm going to read the aloud scenario. I'm going to ask a question and then facilitate a discussion. As a student, you guys are going to listen, write down some notes, and then talk about it. So as I said before, normally we would do this as a pair deck, but because of our devices, we're just going to wait a little while, probably until next week when we can do this live. However, let's jump right into our first read. I want you guys to think about what is the situation about. And this is an example of mathematical practice number 1. So the problem says Mr. Thornton moves horses from one stable to another using a trailer. The trailer can hold no more than 4 horses, and it can support no more than a total of 4,500 pounds. Mr. Thornton loads his trailer with 3 horses that weigh 890 pounds, 1,250 pounds, and 940 pounds. He wants us to load a 4th horse in this trailer. So this is what we're going to discuss with your classmates about this situation. I want you guys to only focus on the context, not the mathematics or the numbers, specifically what this is about. And do you understand the words that describe this situation? So, in your discussion, how would you describe this problem in your own words? What's the context of the story? And could you actually retell this story using your own words? So, Mr. Spencer is going to pause the video at this time. Let's take about 2 to 3 minutes for about three of you guys to share out what it is that this whole story or situation is about in your own words. Now that you guys have had a chance to discuss, let's go ahead and move on to our second read. Now it's time for our second read. Our second read is going to focus on what are the quantities in the situation and how are those quantities related. So that you don't have to keep hearing my voice, we're going to pause the video again and I'm going to ask that one of you actually reads it out loud for us. So this time when one of your classmates is reading, please make sure you listen for the important information in the situation. That means quantities, which are numbers in their units. That stuff's going to help us solve this problem. You always want to look for both. Sometimes they're not numbers. So as your classmate is reading, make sure that you read the situation out loud to yourself as well. Now that one of your classmates has had the chance to read the situation to you all, I want you guys to drop in the chat what are some of the important quantities that you noticed from the context of this problem. Now remember, quantities don't just have to be numbers, they can be units of measurement, they could be things that are pertinent that's going to help us solve this problem. So let's take about 1 minute to drop any of the important quantities in the chat. Now that you are dropping some numbers in the chat, hopefully you noticed the following. Hopefully you put 4,500 pounds, 890, 1250, 940, and then of course pounds is our unit of measure. So now I want you guys to think about what do you notice about these quantities? How will these help us solve this problem? Let's pause the video just for a second and discuss how can we devise a plan to solve this problem based on what's been given to us? Are there any patterns that we notice? Any relationships? If so, what are they? Now it's time for our third and final read, and the focus is going to be what are the possible mathematical questions we could ask of this situation. So once again, I'll read it one more time for us. Mr. Thornton moves horses from one stable to another using a trailer. The trailer can hold no more than 4 horses, and it can support no more than a total of 4,500 pounds. Mr. Thornton loads his trailer with 3 horses that weigh 890 pounds, 1,250 pounds, and 940 pounds. He wants to load a fourth horse in his trailer. Now, we're not going to actually solve this today. We just wanted to make sure that we knew how to unlock this prompt and be able to solve it. So let's pause for a second and let's generate a list of all the questions that you can ask about this scenario. We're not interested in like what colors were the horse or what clothes does Mr. Thornton have on, but what are some mathematical questions that we can ask ourselves that will help us solve these problems? You can take some time right now for about 2 minutes to unmute yourself and discuss with the class or drop them in the chat. So let's pause the video just for a brief moment. So once again, we've come to the end of our 3-read protocol. We did our first read, our second read, and our third read. Thank you guys so much for sharing out your mathematical questions in the chat and also verbally. And I want to take a second to let's use the chat one more time. Now that we've gone through this 3-read protocol, I want to know, do you guys think that you would be able to do this again in the future? If you don't understand, put a 1 in the chat. If you need some more practice, place a 2 in the chat. If you understand it, it was pretty simple. First read, second read, third read, and the focus. Then put a 3 in the chat. And then if you are ready to go ahead and teach a friend, place a 4 in the chat. Now, before we wrap up today's lesson, I want to take some time to discuss the independent assignments for both today, Tuesday, and also tomorrow, Wednesday. Also, do not forget, as we mentioned earlier in the lesson, that all of your supplies are due Monday, September 14th. Remember, you need a 3 or a 5 subject spiral notebook, pencils, and highlighters. So, for today, Tuesday, your assignment is due at 11:59 p.m. The assignment is going to be a Pear Deck where you're going to annotate the FAME task. So in Google Classroom, there will be a link for the students to complete a self-paced Pear Deck activity. It is extremely important that all of you read the directions that are in Google Classroom because there will be a link for you to join the Pear Deck and you'll be able to move through the slides easily and answer the questions that are there. Once again, all of the instructions on how to access it will be in the classwork section assignments on Google Classroom. Wednesday, remember there's no live class. However, you will have 2 assignments that are going to be due by 11:59 on Wednesday. These assignments will be available on Tuesday, which is today. So if you complete them today, then you won't have any work to do tomorrow. However, they are not due until tomorrow at 11:59 p.m. The first assignment, it will be another short Pear Deck assessment or assignment about literacy, and then you're going to do part 2 of the 4 fours challenge. The same rules do apply. Remember, last week we did numbers 1 through 20. This week, well, for today or Wednesday, you're going to do numbers 21 through 40. Remember, you can only use 4 operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. You can also use grouping symbols like parentheses. And remember, you can't use any other number than 4. And at most, you can only use 4 fours. If you need a refresher on the rules of how to do this, remember there was a video that was posted last week on how to complete this assignment if you have any questions. So once again, Tuesday's assignment is the annotation of the FAME task. That's due at 11:59 p.m. Wednesday, you have 2 assignments. Both of them are pretty short, but they're not due until Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. Once again, kings and queens, we want to make sure that we're getting off to a great start to the school year. I will be sure to upload this presentation in Google Classroom in case you want to revisit it. And then also remember, we want to make sure that we're submitting all of our assignments on time because we want to make sure that we're getting the best grades as possible. At this time, I'm going to end the video. If you have any questions for Mr. Spencer, please do so, and then we're going to release you to your independent work time. I can't wait to see you all and talk to you again on Thursday. Have a great rest of your day.